Perfect. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Brothers and sisters, we'd like to continue the program with the recitation of the Holy Qur'an by Fatima Maranji. Please welcome her with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن يقنط منكن لله ورسوله وتعمل صالحا نؤتها أجرها مرتين واعتدنا لها رزقا كريما. يا نساء النبي لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلن قولا معروفا وقرن في بيوتكن فلا تبرجن تبرج الجاهلية الأولى وأقمنا الصلاة وآتينا الزكاة وأطعنا الله ورسوله إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Brothers and sisters, we are fortunate today to welcome Riaz Walji, who's going to be speaking to us about Dhikr in the Qur'an. Please welcome him with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Hello? Yep. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Sorry, some technical difficulties. Yeah. Okay. Firstly, I'm honored and privileged to you all for inviting me here. So thank you very much. So the topic is Dhikr in the Qur'an, and the reason for the topic is first of all, I'm grappling with this issue myself. Dhikr and Dhikr of Allah. And so when Miqdad said to me, what would you like to speak on? This popped in my mind. But also it's something that is not discussed much as well in our normal majalis and things. Now the meaning of dhikr and its verbal forms and noun forms, the different noun forms are mentioned. So mention, recall, or sight, or be mindful, or remembrance, and there are many other meanings that are there. And the Quran uses the word dhikr and its verbal and nominal or noun forms, use a variety of its noun and verbal forms. The number of verses in the Quran which where we find the word dhikr and its other forms are approximately 292. In this talk, we're going to inshallah summarize or give a summary of the verses that are to do with the practice of dhikr. What do we mean by the practice of dhikr? Repeating the name of God, or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or being mindful of God. Now, in the Quran, we are told to remember Allah, but not just Allah, but also the name of Allah, but also the blessings of Allah and the bounties of Allah. So we will include those within this discussion, inshallah. And the number of verses approximately that refer to just the practice of dhikr, I think, are 67 out of the 292. So obviously the aim of this talk is to emphasize the importance of dhikr as a practice, but it should be obvious to all of us that it is not enough in itself just to do dhikr throughout one's life, and nothing else is not what is meant in the Quran. Alongside dhikr of Allah, there has to be practice of the Sharia, there has to be ethical living, there has to be the acquisition of virtue and the removal of vices. We have to also attempt to increase our understanding of the nature of this world, of creation, of human beings, and of God, and the relationship between God, humanity or human beings, creation, and the world. And if dhikr is done alongside these things, then dhikr will aid us. It will aid us in terms of deepening our Sharia practice, our ethical living, our understanding of all of those things that we've just mentioned right now. When going through the verses, those I think was it 67 or so, or 62, when going through those verses, I divided them into 10 themes or categories, and just so that we could discuss it. So there are those verses which I have categorized as mentioning the doing of dhikr a lot. Okay, so the doing of dhikr a lot, that's one theme. The other one is the dhikr, or when we are commanded to remember the blessings and the bounties of Allah upon us. So that's another category. Another category is the effect of dhikr. What is the effect of doing dhikr? Another category is Salaat. In the Quran, Salaat is referred to as a type of dhikr, a special type of dhikr, a concentrated type of dhikr. Fifthly, the fifth theme really is to do with the command. You see, we are told, we are commanded. The Arabic language is a command to do dhikr of Allah, a command to remember Allah's name, a command to remember the bounties of God and the blessings of God. Now, usually in usulul fiqh, a command means obligation. So here there's a slight discussion we can have is, well, are we actually obligated? Is there an obligation here to do the dhikr of Allah in the way? So inshallah we'll come to that as well. Then there's another theme is dhikr and salvation and success. The Quran seems to tie up dhikr as being important to salvation and our success. And we'll discuss what that means, success, in what sense. There's also some verses in the Quran that discuss doing less dhikr. So we'll touch upon that as well. Also, shaitan and the relationship between shaitan and the amount of dhikr that we do, or the absence of dhikr. Then there are verses from which we can extrapolate a kind of guidance of how to do dhikr, so the methods of dhikr. And lastly, just a few verses on touching upon how Qur'an is referred to as the dhikr, al-dhikr. And reading it is actually dhikrullah. So these are the 10 themes. I need to go faster. So obviously those 60 odd verses are too many to go through, not enough time for us to go through all of them. So the format very quickly is just I'm going to go through each theme or category. I've chosen one verse in each category and I'll translate it, and then I'll give a summary of the translation that we've just done, that particular verse, and the points of the other verses, or summary of the other verses, and briefly indicate the implications and explanations and those sort of things. So the first one was doing dhikr a lot. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهُ كَثِيرًا. So you have a good example in God's Messenger, in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For whoever hopes for God, whoever has a hope for God and the last day, and remembers God a lot. So the first thing to note is that the Blessed Prophet is an exemplar. He's an exemplar for the one who hopes for God the last day and remembers God a lot. So the question may come, well, how about those who don't remember God a lot and don't maybe have a hope, or aren't always hoping for God or meeting God and the last day? Is he not an exemplar for them as well? Well, obviously, yes, he's an exemplar for everyone at whatever level, but particularly, this verse saying particularly for the one who hopes for God, meeting God the last day, and remembers God a lot. So in terms of effectivity, the Prophet's uswa really has an effect, I think the verse is saying, for these people. Particularly for these people, it has an effect. So if we want the Prophet to be our exemplar, we should be remembering God a lot. Other verses now. There is a verse where my screen has gone. I'm sorry, and I haven't. So just a quick summary of the points in the other verses, or a few of the other verses here. So there's a verse which talks about the poets who mock the truth and are heading for damnation, except those poets who have faith, behave morally, and remember God a lot. Okay, so in our day and age, it'd be those who are public, so advertisers, those who are advertising themselves, right? So the advertisers, anybody who's there in a public forum, who's mocking the truth, are heading for damnation, except those who are public, advertising, who have faith, behave morally, and remember God a lot. Again, remember God a lot is there. So the job isn't important. You know, we can universalize all the verses of the Qur'an. The job isn't important. The poet isn't important. What's important over here is that there is those poets, or those people who are in their jobs, who are publicly, knowingly, mockingly misguiding people. And of course, the exception is made for those who actually have faith, behave morally, and remember God a lot. It's not moving again. Okay, it's now moving. So the next verse is just the verse that I recited at the beginning, that dua of Hazrat Musa, the famous dua of Hazrat Musa, Rabbi shrah li sadri. In that, as part of that dua, he actually continues and he asks for Hazrat Harun. He asks Allah to make Hazrat Harun, his brother, to be his helper and share in his task of confronting Fir'aun and of spreading the message. And then it says this, so that they may both remember God and glorify God a lot. So he's asking for a helper, and the reason is also so that they may remember and glorify God a lot. So again, we can see that remembering God a lot is a goal, a desire, and an action of the prophets. The next verse is a general verse, which is just commanding the faithful, all of us, to remember God a lot. Okay, so it's a command. So it's Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udhkuru nudhkurullaha kathiran, for example, right? So remember God a lot. So O believers, remember God a lot. It's a command. So here there's a command. Now here we'll talk about this later on, but what does it signify? Does it signify obligation, emphasis, and importance? So here it's a bit confusing, and hopefully we'll show why as we move on. Very quickly, the last verse I think in this category that I've chosen is this: for men and women who remember God a lot. Okay, so for men and women who remember God a lot, God has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. So now this is in Surah Ahzab. There's a whole list of men and women who are faithful, the truthful men and the truthful women, the penitent men and the penitent women, and it goes on and on and on. And right at the end it says, and the women and the men who remember God a lot, and the women who remember God a lot. So for all of these, Allah has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. Okay, so again, featuring in it is this whole notion of remembering God a lot. So very quickly, moving on to the next theme. The next theme is the dhikr of blessings, remembering the blessings and the bounties of God. So this is the ayat, or part of the ayat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dhkuru ni'matallahi alaykum, and it continues. So, O you who have faith, remember the blessing of God upon you. Now, a summary of this verse and then the other verses very quickly, or some of the other verses. So the Qur'an is exhorting us to remember God here indirectly. So often not directly but indirectly, i.e. remember the bounties of God, remember the blessings of God. And there are two words that are used often in these category of verses: blessings, ni'mah, or bounties as Allah, Allahi, Allah, right? So the number of verses that refer to this ni'mah of Allah or bounties of Allah are approximately 14, and majority of them mention ni'mah as opposed to bounties Allah. So, or Allah rather. So that's the first set of verses. That's the first verse that we just talked about. The next set of verses are approximately 5 verses that are directed at the Jews. So here it's saying, Ya Bani Israel, udhkuru ni'matallahi alaykum, right, for example. So we have 5 of those type of verses. So in it gives examples of the blessings to them. And this is usually the format. So the format will say, O believers, or O Jews, or O mankind, remember the bounties of Allah, and then it says when He has done this, this and this. So in these 5 verses it says, why remember and what are the bounties He has sent upon you? Well, He sent you prophets from amongst yourselves. He gave you kingdoms and made kings out of you. He preferred you over others. He saved you from Fir'aun and his persecutions. Okay, so these are some of the examples. So therefore remember what He has done for you, what Allah has done for you. Then there are 5 verses that address the faithful, the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Again it says, remember, O believers, remember the blessing of God upon you. And the examples are, for example, there is guidance given in the Qur'an about divorce. And then it says, remember the ni'mah, this is a ni'mah from Allah from you. So guidance is ni'mah. The Muslims before the Prophet came, they were all enemies. So Islam and the Prophet united them, God united them. So it says, look, we have united enemies, making them brothers. So this is a ni'mah, okay, a bounty. You were on the verge or the edge of hell. Again, we saved you from that. So that's a ni'mah. We have saved you from the hands of a hostile community, the Quraysh. Again, that's a ni'mah. We sent wind and angels in the battle of Khandaq. This is a ni'mah. So whatever God has done, remember those things that He has done for you. So these are now specific occurrences in the lives of the faithful of that time. Okay, so at the time of Medina. There's one verse that addresses all of humankind. It says, Ya ayyuhan nas udhkuru ni'matallahi alaykum. Okay, so it's addressing all of humankind. And the example that is given is why? Because He provides rizq for you from the heavens and the earth. Notice how this is a general phenomenon for all humans of all times. So it's calling us. So remember all the bounties, everything. So then we have the next set of verses the next verse. Allah also reminds us of examples of blessings without explicitly asking us to remember blessings of Allah. Okay, so there won't be any explicit mentioning of remember Allah's blessings, but he'll just say, and remember when I did this, this and this, for example, or we did this, this and this, right? So the exhortation to remember Allah's blessings is implicit, it's not explicit. Okay? So remember when, for example, your numbers, O faithful, O you who are faithful, when your numbers were less and God increased them. Remember that, that's a bounty. Or when your numbers were less and there was threat of kidnap, but God protected you. Okay, I'm summarizing the verse, okay? And then the last one is basically the notion of, and this is what this ayat conveys, which is that everything has been made in this earth subservient to us, right? To human beings. Okay, so ships and cattle. And the verse says, so that you may use them, i.e. ride them. And when you ride them and you're using these things, whatever we're using, the table, the chair, the mic, everything, whatever we're using, then to remember the blessings of Allah and then to glorify Him. Okay, so this is in the context of cattle that they ride upon or ships that they ride upon, right? But obviously it's for, in our context, it will be for all these things, yeah? The effect of dhikr, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alladhina amanu wa tatma'innu qulubuhum bi dhikrillah, ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. The penitent, those who are repentant, are those who have faith and whose hearts are assured at rest by the remembrance of God. Undoubtedly, unquestionably, by the remembrance of God, hearts are assured at rest, at peace. So the summary of this verse and other verses, so in this verse, obviously the cause is the dhikr of God. So dhikr of God, the practice of remembrance of God, it is a cause. What is its effect? Its effect is on the heart. The heart has peace. It comes at peace, and it is assured. It has assurance. So that's the thing. Now there are other verses where I think it's talking about the possible effect. I can't be 100%, but I think that what the verse is talking about is the effect of doing dhikr a lot on God. Okay? So a possible effect of doing lots of dhikr of Allah is, and it's in these two verses, that when God is mentioned, such people who do a lot of dhikr, their hearts quake with awe upon hearing His name. Okay? So they are in awe of Him. They may not be so physically so shaking, maybe it is for some, but for others it'll just be like there'll be something that happens, right? So when the name of Allah is mentioned, their hearts, there's something that happens in their heart. Okay, there's an awe, a sense of awe. Now there's an effect also on the disbelievers as well. Okay, so when the dhikr of Allah is mentioned to disbelievers, when they hear the name of God, the opposite reaction. Their hearts shrink away, they are repelled, they are filled with a sort of disgust. Okay, so this is an effect of dhikr of Allah. Very quickly, Salaat as dhikr. So in the Qur'an, Salaat is termed as dhikr, a kind of dhikr. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Innani anallahu la ilaha illa ana, fa'abudni wa aqimis salata lidhikri. Verily, indeed, I am God, there is no God but I, therefore serve me and perform the prayer for my remembrance. So, in the Qur'an, Salaat is a form of dhikr, and we'll show this in the next few verses, inshallah. But Salaat basically is a form of dhikr of God. Okay, so in Salah we are remembering Allah. But it's a special form. It's a concentrated attention on and devotion to God. Whereas normal dhikr, as we'll know, it just happens, we're supposed to be doing it all the time, and so on and so forth. But this one is a special one. It's where you are really blocking out everything or trying to block out everything and just to focus and pray to God. Right? So it's a special one. The second thing is, or the second sort of maybe evidence for this notion that Salat is a kind of dhikr, is this: وَإِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ. Right. So when the call for Salat on the day of Jummah is made, rush to dhikr of God and leave trading, for that is better. What's better? The dhikr of God. Okay. So here, one may say, well, no, it's not referring to the Salat. It's referring to that whole occasion. Right. Going there, listening to the khutbah. That all of that is dhikr. In any case, dhikr, even if it's general, it's still including the prayer. So the prayer is still subsumed within it. Okay. The next verse is this one, which is even in fear, I remember I'm summarizing, yeah, I'm just giving you the summarize, I'm not giving the actual translation. So even in fear or in inability to perform the exact form of Salaat, so it's time for namaz al-Zuhr, for example, and there is something that is causing us fear. In those days it was in the context of battle or persecution, or there's some sort of inability where maybe in the motorway or something. Okay, Quran says perform it anyway, even during walking or upon transport. Okay, then when you are able, remember Allah as you have been taught. Remember Allah as you have been taught. Okay, so do dhikr of Allah as you have been taught. Okay, so this as you have been taught means, I think it's referring to, or Mufassirin says referring to Salaat. Okay, so then you can refer it better. When you have safety, then you can pray in the normal way as you've been taught. So here dhikr is, Salaat is a kind of dhikr. So the dhikr of God, which includes, so this is the next verse. Again, I'm summarizing, I'm paraphrasing rather. The dhikr of God, which includes the form of Salaat, is greater than any other action. Okay, so that's what the verse says. The dhikr of God, which includes the form of Salaat, is greater than any other action. Okay, so that's the other verse. So that's quite explicit there. Now here, is it a command? So when the Quran is telling us udhkurullaha kathiran, for example, right, or udhkur isma rabbika, right, and we'll come to others as well. Or, yes, when this is being said, the form of the verb in Arabic, as you all know, is a command, and in a legal in the legal things that we do in legal sciences, we learn that the command signifies obligation. So this is an example. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Fadhkuruni adhkurkum washkuruli wala takfuruni. So remember me, command, remember me, and I will remember you, and be thankful to me, and do not be ungrateful towards me. Okay, so first of all, there's a command there. So what does it signify? Are we supposed to, is this actually a command? Is it commanding us? It's definitely a command, but is it an obligation? So Hazrat Zakaria is asked, right? So he's asked for a son. He then says, oh, I can't believe I'm going to get a son. And then Allah says, well, you asked for a son, so I'm going to give you a son, or I'm going to give you a child. Anyway, then he says this, right? So Hazrat Zakaria is asked to be silent for 3 days because he asked for a sign, right? A sign. So Hazrat Zakaria alayhi salam is asked to be silent for 3 days and to remember his Lord a lot. And it's a command. Remember your Lord a lot and glorify him in the evening and in the morning. Now, obviously, it's a command, and for the Prophet, it signifies obligation. Okay? But how about the first verse that we just, udhkuruni adhkurkum? Is this signifying obligation, or is it an emphasis, right? So a mustahab, emphasis, signifying sort of importance. I'm not sure, and I think here the ulama, why haven't they made it obligatory, remembering of God, right? It's not actually an obligation as such. I'm not sure, but you will see that later on that maybe it is obligation, but I don't know. But anyway, okay, so this is another one. So when leaving Arafat, the next verse, when leaving Arafat during Hajj, it says remember God a lot. Okay, so it's a command. The form that is being used is command during Hajj, right? Oh, another verse again is the same command. Okay, so remember Allah a lot during Hajj for appointed days, right? Appointed days. So again, it's a command. So what does it signify? Okay, I'm not sure. Hazrat Musa is told that he and his brother must not neglect the dhikr of God. Again, we can say, okay, maybe because the Prophet, then maybe for him it's actually an obligation. But then how about for us? Anyway, okay, now we come to the theme or category of doing less dhikr. Okay, so Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you can just ignore the first part, the part which is after the jim, right? After the sort of comma or stop, or partial stop. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَن يُعْرِضْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ رَبِّهِ يَسْلُكْهُ عَذَابًا سَعَدًا. Whoever turns away from the remembrance of his Lord, he will drive him, Allah will drive him into an increasing chastisement. Okay, so now often with some of these verses, some commentators said that the dhikr over here, dhikr of Allah here could be the Qur'an. But others like Ulama Tabatabai say no, this is actually referring to dhikr of God, and it's general. It also may include the Qur'an, but it's also general. Okay, so here we can take it general. So here, this verse is saying that if you turn away from the dhikr of Allah, anyone who turns away from the dhikr of Allah, Allah will put him into an increasing, or drive him into an increasing chastisement. Okay, so here it seems as though salvation, success is linked to dhikr of Allah. Why? Because if you don't do dhikr of Allah, if you turn away from dhikr of Allah, rather if you turn away from it. So if you're averse to it, if you don't like it, right? So it's not us, alhamdulillah, but those people who actually don't like it, right, turn away from it, are averse to it, then for them it's hellfire. Okay, so here success seems to be linked, may be linked to dhikr of Allah. Okay, there's also a correlation between turning away from our message, okay, and desiring only the present life. Okay, so there's a verse in Surah Najm which says فَأَعْرِضْ أَنْ مَنْ تَوَلَّى عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا. Okay, because it's dhikrina, okay, here na means our message, so here it means the Qur'an. Okay, so here is the Qur'an. But we know what the Qur'an's message is. The Qur'an's message is basically do dhikr of Allah, right? So whoever turns away from Qur'an and its core message, which is God's centricity, okay, and they desire only the present life. So there seems to be a correlation. Okay, so there seems to be why does he use that verse, right? So there seems to be a correlation between turning away from our message or dhikr of Allah and desiring only the present life. Okay, so it seems to be that if our mind isn't on God and His message, then automatically our mind will be occupied by other than God. Okay, that's what the mind does. It latches onto something, an object, a thought, an emotion, an experience, right? That's what it does. That's what our minds do. Okay, if it isn't on God, if it isn't on God's message, then it turns to these objects of our awareness, our consciousness. Okay, so it turns to the me and the world. So the next verse is giving us the characteristics. So it's giving us the people who do less dhikr. Okay, so one of the characteristics of the hypocrites is that they hardly do any dhikr of Allah. Okay, now that doesn't mean that people who do less dhikr are munafiq. That doesn't mean that at all. It's just telling you what munafiq, a characteristic of munafiqah. Okay, so people who don't do a lot of dhikr, maybe inwardly or outwardly or whatever, it doesn't mean that they are mu'min. No. It's just saying that definitely if he's a munafiq, or if she's a munafiq, then that person, a characteristic of them is they won't remember God a lot, hardly at all, if ever. Okay, this is a very interesting one, which is that Hazrat Sulaiman reminisces. Okay, so he remembers. So Hazrat Sulaiman is given a gift of horses, and he remembers how he used to prefer the good things of the world over the remembrance of Allah. So he used to prefer the things of this world. There was a time, a period, maybe before his prophethood, maybe when he was a young man, where he used to prefer the world's life over the dhikr of God. So what this seems to imply is that dhikr of Allah is a process. It happens naturally. We naturally all will be attracted to the world at some point. As we become a bit older, and for some maybe a bit younger, then we will start to prefer the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a few more verses. There are verses who curse those who are hard of heart regarding the mention of God. So there are those who really are hard of heart, i.e., they really don't want to, listen to the dhikr of God. And then there's another verse which says, I'm paraphrasing, don't obey the one who we have caused his heart to be heedless of the dhikr of God. Such a person follows his own desires. So again, there's a correlation here, an explicit one, between heedlessness, lack of attention on God, and following his own desires, i.e. being selfish. So selfishness and being aware of God. Turning away from dhikr is the last one, I think. Turning away from dhikr leads to a constricted life, the Qur'an says. Turning away from dhikr leads to a constricted life, a narrow life, a very superficial life, you can say. And it leads to blindness on the day of resurrection. Okay, so here dhikr, some commentators have said it's just the Qur'an being mentioned here. This is what is referring to the Qur'an. But Tabatabai says no, it's general, but it's also specific. It's referring to both. Generally dhikr of Allah, but it also includes, why does it include this, the Qur'an, but also the other divine texts as well? Why? Because this is in the context of Hazrat Adam. Okay, so Hazrat Adam is being told this verse, right? So so that's that one. Shaitan, I've only got a few slides. I know how time is, but I've only got a few slides. If it's okay, I'll yeah? Okay. So so this is now the category or the theme of shaitan and doing less dhikr or absence of dhikr. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَن يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. Very, very, very interesting verse. Whoever blinds himself to the remembrance of the All-Merciful, to him we assign a shaitan as a comrade, as a friend, as a companion. Very, very ajib, strange, right? We assign for him. So if you don't do the dhikr of Allah, then there will be with you, alongside you, a shaitan. Or maybe the shaitan be awoken. I don't know. But anyway, now there's another verse which says that shaitan wants, his aim, his desire is to obstruct us from the dhikr of God. Shaitan is the one who makes the hypocrites and the liars forget the dhikr of God. He has mastery over them. So it seems as though dhikr of God is an antidote to the influence of shaitan. By doing dhikr of God, somehow it purifies us, it prevents us from being hypocrite and liars, and it lessens the influence possibly of shaitan as well. Okay, so now very, very quickly, the method of doing dhikr, and I actually have only 3 slides left. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Okay, so this is referring to the ulul albab. Ulul albab can be translated as maybe the possessors of understanding, or it could be in sort of more Sufi language or Irfani language, could be possessors of the hearts. Okay, so those whose hearts are really awoken, right? So who are totally awake. So possibly, there's a range of interpretations. So the possessors of hearts are those who remember God standing, sitting, and on their sides, and reflect upon the creation of the heavens and the earth, and then they say, "Our Lord, you have not created this without a purpose in vain. Glory be to you, guard us against the chastisement of the fire." Okay, so what's the method that the Qur'an gives us that we can extrapolate from the Qur'an? So we should be remembering God standing and sitting, and also on our sides as well. Okay, so basically we're supposed to do this. What does that mean? It means as much as possible. Okay, kathiran, as much as possible, whenever we have free moments or free time. And even when we're doing things, we should be doing it. But anyway, now this verse again, this is again mentioned, this sort of remember God standing, sitting on their sides is mentioned again in Surah Nisa. Okay, so even in time of war. So in the time of war, we should be remembering God. After Salaat, remember God standing, sitting, and on your sides. Okay, so even in time of war, right? So then it says, another verse says, remember God as you remember your own father, or even more devoutly. So how should you remember Allah? With that devotion, the reverence that you have for your father, or the love you have for your father, or the love that or the respect that you have for your father. Or remember that your father, if your father was not, you would not be. As that origin point, Allah is the origin of us. So as that, in that way, with total obedience, when your father says to you something, you obey it. Yes. So in that sense, I think. So this is how I've interpreted it, right? So with all these things, so remember Allah as you remember your father, or even more devoutly, right? Remember the name of God and devote yourself unto Him very devoutly. So again, that's covered by the previous one, but this is again just mentioning it. So وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا, right? So, and remember the name of God and devote yourself unto Him very devoutly. Okay, so now now here is the name of God. Okay, so before it was just remember God, right? So here's the name of God, i.e. the name of God. It can be Allah or any other name, even Huwa, right? Qul Huwa Allahu, right? So Huwa or Allah, or even any other name of Allah, right? Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and so on and so forth. Remember the name of God morning and evening. Okay, so now here ulama have said literally those times. So or maybe it could be that in those times, morning and evening, spend some time doing the dhikr of Allah, chanting the name of Allah, maybe more so. But it could also, but we know actually that it's actually all the time, right? All the time, but maybe those times have been specified in the Qur'an for specifically, right? So set aside, get into the habit. Don't let trade or sale divert attention from dhikr of God. Okay, so don't let trade or sale, so i.e. any job. Now over there in those days the main job was selling and trading, right? But here any job. Somehow try in a way that don't let any job make you divert your attention from dhikr of God. Don't let property and children divert your attention from the dhikr of God, i.e. any possession that you have. Okay, so nowadays any possession or any family member, right? When any wrong mistake, any wrong that we do, any mistake that we do, or any sin that we do is an opportunity to remember God and to ask for forgiveness. Okay, so in one sense we will always yours truly is very, very fallible and is making mistakes all the time. So we are always making mistakes. So these are an opportunity for us to remember Allah and to ask for His forgiveness. Okay, so remember God within. This is a very nice one. Remember God within, humbly, fearfully, and not loudly, morning and evening, and don't be heedless of God. Don't be mindless of God. Okay, don't refer to future action without saying inshallah. Okay, so don't refer to any future action without saying inshallah. So even in our thoughts, when we're thinking, many of our thoughts are to do with the future and so on and so forth. Maybe we should get into the pattern, or I need to be in the pattern of whenever I have a future thought, maybe saying inshallah. Okay, and if you forget, remember God and ask for an even better guidance. Yeah, recite Qur'an, especially the verses that give an awe of God. Then the Qur'an says, so recite this Qur'an, especially verses that give a awe of God. Then your skin and your heart will soften to the dhikr of Allah. That's the words that I use. Your skin and your heart will soften to the dhikr of Allah. So recite Qur'an to prepare, i.e. your skin, i.e. your body, right? Your outer, your body, right? Your skin. So recite Qur'an to prepare your whole being for dhikr, i.e. your body, your mind, your heart, i.e. be totally attentive. Try to be totally attentive to God. For the faithful, okay, for the faithful, anyway, I can't remember that. So for the faithful, the time is now. Okay, for the faithful, for those who believe, the time is now to humble their hearts to dhikr of Allah. So when should we start doing dhikr of Allah? It's always now. The Quran in this verse in Surah Hadid is saying it's now. Okay, that's not a question, actually, a rhetorical question. Isn't it time for the believers? But I've just sort of paraphrased it in this way. Yeah. So the time is now for us to humble our hearts to the dhikr of Allah. Finally, the Qur'an. The Qur'an is termed as dhikr, and reading it is dhikrullah, right? So this is the verse, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidun, right? Lahafidun. Indeed, we have revealed the reminder, and indeed we are its guardians. Okay, we are its guardians. So, so the Qur'an is a reminder. Qur'an is an admonition, a reminder, a tadhkira. Okay, and whoever wants, the Qur'an says, will remember it. And actually, they will not remember it unless God wills. Okay, so that's what the Qur'an says. So when you remember God, when you remember the Qur'an, actually it's God remembering it. Very interesting. And the same two verses, so the fact that the Qur'an is a reminder or it's an admonition, and whoever wants will remember it, right? Whoever wants to will remember it, right? So those two clauses are again repeated in this verse in Surah 80. I can't remember the name. Surah 80, 11 to 2. I think it's Abasa, right? It's Abasa. Yeah, it's Abasa. Surah Abasa. And then the next verse is saying, we recite to you the signs, verses, and the wise reminder. So again, the verses that are being revealed so this you is to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we recite to you, O Muhammad, the signs, the verse, and the wise reminder. Okay, so the Quran is the wise reminder. And now this is very interesting. In Surah Qamar, the moon, right? In the Surah of the Qamar, in Surah Qamar, this verse has comes 4 times. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Very, very interesting. And this is what it means, paraphrase, right? The Qur'an has been made easy to understand and to remember. Is there anyone who will take heed or remember? Okay, so here Qur'an has been made easy for recitation, easy for memorization, and in terms of its meanings for understanding and pondering upon. Now obviously I know we are not all Arabs, but we should really try to recite Qur'an, memorize Qur'an really, but with the understanding as well. And engaging in memorization. I don't know why we don't have hifz. The Sunni community has a lot of hifz, I think, right? We don't have enough hifz in the Shia community. We need to start, I think it will transform us, and it will bring us maybe back to more of an Imam-centric religion that is essentially God-centric. Yes, so we have that Imam reverence for the Imams, but it's directed to God. Yes, so I think Quran is the corrector actually. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Thank you all for listening. Can I please request you all to recite one Surah Fatiha for Allah to forgive my sins and all of our sins, and the sins of all who are alive, and the sins of all who have moved on to the next life, and for Allah to give shifa to all of those who are in need of shifa, and for Allah to give sabr to all who are in need of sabr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim.
We have some time for questions. Is there any questions from either side?
Hello. Assalamu alaikum for the
Alaikum
lecture.
salam.
It's very well presented and I learnt a lot. Now, one thing you did say earlier, that zikr of Allah should be remembered all the time. Yeah, a lot. There's a lot of blessings that way, a lot of sawab. Now, when you say a lot, that's a very big, ambiguous word. Do you mean 24 hours a day? Do you mean 3 times a day when we pray Salaat? Or what do you mean every day in everything, what I do, my cooking, looking after my mum, coming here, going to Tesco's? What do you mean by every time?
So I'm just saying what the Quran says. I can tell you for sure I don't do it all the time, right? You know, right now I'm not, you know, so here the Quran is saying a lot, and I think that's what we need to take. You know, and I think what our teachers say and what the masters say is that the more we engage with it, the more then we do it, and the more heartfeltness we feel towards it, and the more it develops, right? So I think that's the best thing, you know, just remember that that's there, that we're supposed to be doing it a lot. What does that mean? As much as possible. And then I think it becomes in that way, it becomes almost automatic, I think, what the people say. So there's a whole science behind the dhikr of Allah, and that's maybe for somebody else to come and tell you, but what happens when you do dhikr of Allah, right? So, and I think the Quran is referring to different stages sometimes of dhikr of Allah. So when it's happening continuously all the time while standing, sitting, and blah, blah, ulul albab, right? Okay, that's like a stage that happens after doing it for many, many years, possibly. Okay, so, but I think sometimes maybe we just start by doing it in the mornings and the evenings, making it a routine, but as much as possible, you know, and also having tasbih. I know, you know, it's not good to sort of show and do it, but yes, why not have tasbih, you know, and do it, and ask Allah to remove that riya that we have, you know, if it's there, but just to do it, you know, and yeah, people shouldn't matter what people think and what they say and so on, you know, life is short, we have to go to our God ultimately. So yeah, have a tasbih, you know, yeah. I don't know if that answers it at all. It's not answering at all, right? Is it? I mean, it's just saying, yeah. I don't know why. What that means, basically.
Out of all the prophets, you know, including prophet, imams, which prophet and imam did most zikr? A lot of people ask this outside community, outside non-Muslims. Which prophet and imam did most zikr of God, of Allah?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the rank of prophethood, I think you basically are pretty much steeped in love of God. So you're pretty much, something else is happening, you know. You know, you're very. I think it's happening all the time. I think they're all. This is why it calls them brothers, right? The Prophet referred to them as my brothers, actually, all the prophets, you know. So yeah, at that point, I think it's they're doing it all the time. How is that possible? How that happens, I don't know. We have to ask somebody. There's some here maybe who know. No. I mean, the Prophet is in the Quran says, right? They're all the, you know, we don't make one better than the other. But of course, there are still differences. You know, some have a different relationship to God, a more intense one. You know, and it manifests differently. But yes, no, they're all equal.
Okay, Riaz, thank you very much. As you went through your schema, you put the fear of God into us. You have to do zikr. I'm saying, I think I am correct that the reciting salawat is a kind of zikr, because I see that many mystic groups, they recite salawat over and over and over as part of their zikr. Are you in agreement with that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a common practice amongst the Urafa is doing a tasbih of astaghfirullah, right? And then doing a salawat, a whole tasbih of salawat, and then doing la ilaha illallah, right? But salawat is extremely important. So astaghfirullah is for our outer body, what we're doing with our outer body and so on. Our personality, if you want, our personality has to become like Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, right? The compassion, the love. So that's salawat. Salawat is important for that, right? And then la ilaha illallah is for our heart. Okay, so but yeah, salawat is very important. Of course, in salawat you have Allahumma salli ala. So whenever you're saying salawat, it's Allah, send blessings upon. So yeah, you're killing 2 birds with one stone. Of course, the angels, inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So if the angels are doing that, you know, absolutely, yes. Oh yes, 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 yes. Okay, that you have to tell me. Yes. About okay. Yes, 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 yes. There's the bigger salawat as well. Yeah, the one. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you very much for your talk. You mentioned a verse, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of those who don't do the dhikr of Allah, God will assign Satan as a comrade for them.
Yeah.
And we see these kinds of ayahs a lot in the Qur'an where God says something along the lines of, if you don't do so-and-so, if you are heedless, then, you know, I will increase that upon you. Do you have any thoughts, or can you share with us some thoughts as to why God says this? The image that I have of God in my mind is that despite the fact that we continue to be heedless sometimes, or we don't do dhikr as much as we should, He continues to bless us, He continues to send us signs. So why does God sometimes tell us, actually, if you don't do dhikr, then I will send Satan as a comrade?
I mean, I think this is talking to really those people who don't, you know, who are very secular. You know, really, and secular. I don't mean sort of non-Muslim. I mean really non-religious, and who are really, you know, for pleasure. I think they live for pleasure and the passions of the world and so on and so forth. I think for people, if we are sort of reminded automatically, and we know where Salaat time is, right? I don't think really this is referring to us. The fact that I think Dhikr is happening all the time at some level. Okay, we're not aware of it, but actually it's happening all the time. There's a part of us, I think, that is doing Dhikr, but we have to come to that level. And I think that even by us doing what we're doing normally right now, 5 daily prayers and fasting and doing what we can and so on, I think that is already keeping shaitan away from us, right? I do think that. I don't think that, you know, I think maybe in moments of anger and so on, then, you know, he comes in, or, you know, when. But yeah, I don't think it's. I think it's referring to for people who are a lot worse. I don't think it's us. I mean, maybe in moments he does. Definitely in moments he'll come, and, you know, وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ, right? When he incites you, then فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, then seek refuge. So yes, in moments, yes, of course, shaitan comes to us, but he's not. I think, you know, we are doing salawat and we're doing a lot. So, but I think the point of this lecture was that we should increase it possibly, you know. And, you know, the dhikr of Allah is really seen as and sort of esoteric and a sort of Sufi type of thing, you know. And we don't do that, you know. And the Shias don't do that, I think, you know. So I think it was more to sort of say, no, well, this is actually our Qur'an, right? This is what Muhammad were doing, you know. I think, yeah, I don't think those sort of verses refer to the bulk of the faithful. No. In moments, shaitan does come in, but yeah.
Sorry if I'm prodding a bit. Even for those who are, let's say, as you said, extremely non-religious or secular, whatever word we want to use, can you expand a bit, as if you have any thoughts again as to why God, even in those circumstances, would be saying, I will assign Satan as a comrade, or God seems to be saying that I will push you even further away?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think it's an existential fact. I think it's something that just happens. You know, there's a spectrum in between. But I think, you know, that's what happens when if you don't have God, and if you aren't trying to be ethical and the rest of it in Sharia and so on, then automatically your passions will come, right? أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ, right? Have you not seen the one who takes his desires for his God? If God isn't there, and this is what we see in the world, right? When God isn't there, then we want the infinite in matter. So we exploit the world, kill the world, we want more and more and more. We want more and more new clothes and so on and so forth. So definitely, you know, there's a correlation between it. I think it's just an existential fact, you know, I think. Yeah, I think it's referring to something very existential, yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Riaz.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thanks so much for such a nice talk, because I really thought this talk would be about, you know, tasbih and tasbih Fatima al-Zahra and that sort of thing. And actually, you really hardly ever mentioned that. It was very much how you incorporate it into your day. So do you have any advice for how we can incorporate dhikr into our day? Something really, really practical. I think, you know, something like saying inshallah whenever you're planning to do something. I think that's excellent. Any other tips, any other tricks for being very practical?
I really don't. I think it's just really trying to put the verses of the Qur'an in practice, honestly, you know, and yeah, just and maybe having moments in the day, so maybe morning and evening, you know, setting time aside, you know, watching our minds and our thoughts, you know, many of our thoughts are not relevant to anything, you know, so, and in those times, for example, driving in the car, you know, where you're just in auto mode driving, you know, you can be doing the dhikr of God in your mind, or for example, you know, watch ourselves, watch our minds, right? A lot of our thoughts that we have are not useful. They aren't, in those times we can be filling it with the dhikr of Allah. I think maybe that's a way to maybe start. I don't know is the answer. I think also praying to God and asking Him to be one of these people. Genuinely, that works, you know. Dua Kumail, okay, these duas, reciting them alone at night, right? I think those things help as well. Tasbih of Bibi Fatima, you know, having that, doing that after. So all these things help, yeah, everything. But main thing is asking Allah to be, to be one of His close ones, you know.
Thanks very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. It's beautiful talk. Jazakallah. Mine is not so much a comment. I just want to share with yourself and others based on some of the questions. I'm aware of this, and I was thinking about it previously, and I saw like some explanation about it from scholars in the past. If you look at dhikr, when you read in the Qur'an mentions dhikr, you could divide it, I think, in 4 types. One is the physical, which is our prayers. The other is verbal, which is in the Qur'an, at-tasbih. And the other is conscious, you know, like in your mind while you're going about your daily life. Conscious. And the last one is subconscious. It's in your heart without you realizing. And then you get to a stage, if you have nazgh from shaitan, and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, he vanishes. But if you don't have dhikr in your life, and it's not embedded in your heart, and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, nothing happens. It doesn't go. And that's how strong the dhikr Allah is in your heart. And lastly, about how to improve, it's what the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran teaches us. Following these and praying and reading Quran. Yeah. So, that's what I wanted. Just wanted to share that. And
Jazakallah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions? Otherwise, we'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Just a couple of reminders. This Sunday we have the Wafat program of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So please do come with Sheikh Ayub, and that will be this Sunday. And you can find out more obviously on the website. On next Friday we have a talk on. We have the children's program. You'll see the poster coming around very soon. So please do join if you are able to. And then next Friday we have a panel discussion on Bibi Zainab alayhi salam. Again, you'll find out more details on the website. Finally, I just would like to inform everyone that of the passing of Hajj Sayyid Abbas Al-Attar, who's the father of Hajj Sayyid Dr. Fadl and Sayyid Nail, and the father-in-law of Doctors Ali Hadawi and Haider Zahari, who passed away yesterday night. And you can find out more about the burial and Fatiha arrangements if you'd like to talk to a member of the committee. So let's recite Surah Fatiha. Surah Fatiha.
Yeah, sure. Should I come up with it?